sound of the door closing in front of my face didn't just echo down the street. It echoed inside my chest. For a moment I stood there, my hand still raised, as if I might knock again. But I didn't, because something inside me already knew. This door wasn't going to open again. Not tonight. Not ever. That door belonged to my son. My wealthy son. The one everyone admired. The one people called successful. The one I was supposed to be proud of. And when I needed help, he turned away. My name is Linda Miller. I am 61 years old. And for most of my life I was never weak. I was never helpless. I was the woman people came to when they needed answers. Money problems. Call Linda. Business trouble. Linda will fix it. Family emergency. Mom will handle it. I built a textile company from the ground up. 35 years of my life went into that business. 35 years of early mornings and sleepless nights. I worked when I was sick. I worked when I was grieving. I worked when I was exhausted. After my husband died 12 years ago, everyone thought the company would collapse. Some partners quietly celebrated. Competitors sharpened their knives. They thought I would break. I didn't. I learned every contract, every supplier, every financial detail. I swallowed insults from men who didn't like taking orders from a woman. And I didn't just survive. I grew the company. I multiplied it. And every time someone asked me why I pushed so hard, I gave the same answer. My children. Everything was for them. I gave them the best schools, the best opportunities, the best start in life, private education, overseas programs, expensive degrees, paid without hesitation. When they wanted houses, I helped with the down payments. When they wanted cars, I signed the checks. When they called, I answered. When they needed money, I sent it. I told myself that was love. I told myself I was being a good mother. I didn't realize I was teaching them something else. 3 weeks before that door slammed shut, I was sitting alone in my office. 23rd floor. Glass walls. City lights. A view most people would envy. But that night it felt empty. I had received 3 phone calls. All on the same day. My oldest son needed money to renovate his kitchen. My middle son wanted funds for a business opportunity. And my youngest son. He didn't ask for anything. He just asked how I was feeling. That difference hit me harder than I expected. I stared at my phone for a long time after the calls ended. And for the first time in decades I felt unsure. Not about business. About family. That night something cracked inside me. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a hairline fracture. And once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. I started asking myself questions I had avoided it for years. If my money disappeared, who would still care? If I became inconvenient, who would still open the door? Did my children love me? Or did they love what I provided? I didn't want to ask them directly. 'Cause words are easy. Actions aren't. So I made a decision. Dangerous one. Painful one. I decided to test them. I told my lawyer Robert everything. He tried to stop me. Linda, he said, this is too much. You're not young anymore. You don't need to prove anything. But I did. I needed to know the truth before it was too late. I asked him to keep everything secret. The company, the accounts, my identity. I told him to prepare documents but not to reveal anything unless I gave the signal. Then I disappeared. I left my penthouse quietly. I put my jewelry in a safe. I turned off my main phone. I bought old clothes from a second-hand store. A gray coat with worn sleeves. Shoes with cracked soles. Pants that didn't quite fit. I didn't wash my hair. I dirted my hands. I tied my belongings in a torn plastic bag. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The woman staring back at me looked invisible. And that's exactly what I needed. The cold was unforgiving. February doesn't care who you used to be. I slept at a bus station the first night. The smell clung to me. People avoided me. Some looked at me with pity. Most didn't look at all. I learned very quickly how easy it is to disappear. By the third day I was ready. Hungry. Cold. exhausted, but ready. I planned the order carefully. First my oldest son, then my middle son, finally my youngest. I told myself I was prepared for rejection. I wasn't. My oldest son's house was enormous. Stone driveway. Perfect lawn. I helped pay for it. I stood at the gate for a long time before pressing the button. When he answered, his voice was flat. He didn't even ask who it was. I told him it was me. There was a pause. Then the gate opened slightly. Just enough to let me in. Not enough to welcome me. He opened the front door before I reached it. But he didn't step outside. He stayed there, blocking the entrance with his body. I told him everything. The business collapsed. That I lost my home. That I had nowhere to go. I told him I just needed a place to sleep. Just one night. He listened. But his eyes kept drifting to the street. To the neighboring houses. To the possibility that someone might see me. "Mom," he said finally. "This isn't a good time." Those words. So polite. Oh, final. I begged him. I hate admitting that. But I did. I told him I could sleep anywhere. The garage. The floor. I told him I was cold. He shook his head. And then he said something that still hurts to remember. This could affect my reputation. Reputation. That was the word he chose. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Let me help." Reputation. I reminded him who I was. I reminded him of his childhood. Of the nights I stayed up helping him study. Of the sacrifices I made. His face hardened. And then he said it. "You always gave us things, Mom. You controlled everything with money. Now that you have none, you can't expect us to fix your mistakes." Mistakes. That's what my life became in his eyes. Then he closed the door. Slowly. Deliberately. I heard the lock turn. I stood there long after he left. I didn't cry. Felt something worse. Emptiness. As if a part of me had stayed behind that door. I walked away without looking back. And I told myself the test wasn't over. Not yet. The second house was modern. Less. Ill. Cold. My middle son answered quickly. For a moment I thought it might be different. He looked shocked. Concern flickered across his face. He let me inside. But only into the entryway. Not further. He closed the door behind me. Quickly. Like he was hiding evidence. I told him the same story. He listened silently. Arms crossed. Calculating. When I finished, he sighed. Tired sigh. The kind doctors use when delivering bad news. "Mom," he said, "I have a reputation to maintain." That word again. Reputation. He explained his career. His patience. His image. Then he pulled out his wallet. Italian leather. A gift I had bought him. He took out a crumpled bill. $50. He held it out without stepping closer. "Take this," he said. "Get a hotel. You can't stay here." I didn't take the money at first. I looked at him, searching for the boy I used to know. The one who promised to take care of me. He wasn't there. Finally I took the bill. Not because I needed it, but because I needed to know if he would feel anything. He didn't. He opened the door and guided me out. Literally pushed me away. As the door closed, he gave me advice. "You should have been more careful. At your age, you should be secure." He blamed me. I stood outside holding $50. That was the value of my relationship with my son. 2 doors. 2 rejections. 2 children I had given everything to. I walked away into the cold night. My hands are shaking. My heart is numb. I had 1 door left. And no expectations. I walked for a long time after that second door closed. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stop moving. The cold had settled deep into my bones, but I barely felt it anymore. Pain has a way of numbing everything else. My shoes were soaked. My feet burned. But none of that compared to the ache in my chest. Because by then, it was no longer about being homeless. It was about being unwanted. I replayed their faces over and over in my mind. Not angry faces. Not cruel faces. Worse, indifferent ones. The kind that looks at you like a problem they want it solved quickly. The kind that don't ask, "How can I help?" but instead ask, "How fast can this end?" I had spent my whole life protecting my children. And when I finally needed protection, they stepped aside. I sat on a bench near a closed grocery store. The lights inside were off. The parking lot was empty. I hugged my coat tighter around my body and stared at the ground. For the first time since I started this test, I asked myself a painful question. What if this is my fault? That thought wouldn't leave me alone. I had blamed my children, their greed, their pride, their obsession with appearances. But had I taught them that? I remembered every time I solved a problem with money. Every time I wrote a check instead of having a conversation. Every time they learned that love arrived in an envelope. I remembered saying things like, "Don't worry, I'll handle it. Just focus on your life. I'll take care of everything." And I realized something terrifying. They believed me. I had raised them to believe that money was safe. That money was security. That money solved everything. And now that money was gone, so was their sense of responsibility. I had given them comfort but never taught them sacrifice. I had taught them success but not compassion. And sitting there in the cold, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. Guilt. Heavy. Unavoidable. A woman walked past me pushing a shopping cart. She was older than me. Her hair was gray and tangled. She stopped when she saw me. "Cold night," she said softly. I nodded. She handed me half a sandwich from a paper bag. "Eat," she said. I tried to refuse. She didn't let me. She just smiled and walked away. Stranger. Showing me more kindness than my own children. I sat there holding that sandwich with shaking hands. And that's when I cried. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just silent tears falling onto the pavement. I cried for my children. I cried for my mistakes. I cried for the woman I had become. And I cried because I knew something I didn't want to admit. I was afraid. Not being poor. Not of sleeping outside. But of growing old alone. I slept that night at a bus station. The benches were hard. The lights were harsh. People came and went without looking at me. In the early hours of the morning, I woke up from the cold. My whole body ached. And as I sat there waiting for dawn, I thought about my youngest son, Daniel. Daniel had always been different. Not loud. Not ambitious in the way his siblings were. He didn't talk about money. He didn't chase titles. He chose to become a teacher. And I had never fully forgiven him for that. I told people I supported his choice. But deep down I thought he was wasting his potential. I compared him to his siblings. To their degrees. Their incomes. Their lifestyles. And I stayed silent when they mocked him. That silence was its own cruelty. Daniel married Sarah. A woman from a humble background. She worked cleaning offices when they met. No powerful family. No connections. No money. I smiled politely. But inside I was disappointed. I wanted more for him. I wanted prestige. I wanted status. I wanted to say my son married well. I never said those words out loud. But Sarah felt them anyway. People always do. I remembered the last family dinner. Jessica talked about her vacation in Europe. Michael bragged about his patience. Daniel sat quietly. Sarah smiled. I noticed how her smile faded as the night went on. And I said nothing. I didn't defend them. I didn't stop it. I let it happen. Now, sitting alone in a bus station, I felt the weight of that silence. By the third day I was exhausted. Hungry. Dirty. But something else had changed. I no longer felt angry. Felt honest. Stripped of my excuses. Stripped of my pride. I knew exactly what this test was revealing. Not just about my children. About me. That morning I stood in front of a small mirror in a public restroom. The woman staring back at me looked older. Smaller. But clearer. Fixed my coat. Picked up my plastic bag. And took a deep breath. One door left. One last chance. Daniel and Sarah's house was far from the wealthy district. No gates. No security. No perfect lawns. Just a small, modest home in a quiet neighborhood. The paint was chipped. The fence leaned slightly. A few flowers grew near the door. I stood there longer than I had at the other houses. My hand hovered over the doorbell, and fear rushed through me. If this door closed too, I didn't know what I would do. I pressed the bell. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Sarah stood there. She froze when she saw me. Her eyes widened. "Linda," she whispered. And before I could say anything, she grabbed my arm. "Oh my God," she said. "What happened to you?" She pulled me inside. Didn't hesitate. Didn't look around. Didn't ask questions. She just pulled me in. Warmth wrapped around me instantly. Not just heat. Human warmth. The kind that makes you feel safe. "Daniel," she called. "Come quick, it's your mom." Daniel appeared from the kitchen. When he saw me, his face changed. Worry. Fear. But not disgust. Not embarrassment. "Mom," he said, rushing toward me. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" His hands touched my shoulders. My face. Checking me. As if I might break. I told them the story. The same one. Lost everything. Nowhere to go. Just needed a place to sleep. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't calculate. He didn't sigh. When I finished, he said one sentence. "You're staying here." I tried to protest. They didn't listen. Sarah brought towels, clean clothes, water for a bath. Daniel insisted I take the bed. They would sleep on the sofa. I argued. They refused. Sarah knelt in front of me. "Your family," she said. "Family doesn't sleep outside." That sentence broke something open inside me. I bathed in their small bathroom. The water was hot. I cried under the spray until my chest hurt. When I came out, clean clothes were waiting on the bed. Simple. They smelled like home. At the table they had prepared soup, toast, orange juice. Nothing fancy. Everything is given freely. They sat with me. They talked normally. They didn't stare. They didn't pity me. They treated me like a person, not a problem. That night, as I pretended to sleep, I heard them whispering in the kitchen. They thought I couldn't hear. The walls were thin. "We don't have much," Daniel said quietly. Sarah paused. Then I heard a drawer open. "We can sell the rings," she said. My heart stopped. "The rings?" Daniel whispered. "They're just things," Sarah replied. "She needs us." I lay there frozen, listening, crying silently into the pillow. That was when I knew. The test had already ended, and I had my answer. That night I didn't sleep. Not because the bed was uncomfortable. It was the most comfortable bed I had slept in for days. But my mind wouldn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two doors closing. And one door is opening. I listened to Daniel and Sarah moving around in the living room. I heard the sofa creak as they tried to make space for each other. I heard Daniel apologize. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "This must be uncomfortable." Sarah laughed softly. "I've slept on worse," she said. "At least tonight someone is safe." Someone. She meant me. I turned my face into the pillow so they wouldn't hear me crying. I wasn't crying because I was tired. I wasn't crying because I was cold. I was crying because I finally understood how wrong I had been. For years I thought I knew what mattered. I thought money meant security. I thought success meant power. I thought love meant providing. But lying in that bed, given to me by two people who barely had anything, I realized how empty my definition had been. The next morning I woke up to the smell of coffee. Cheap coffee. The kind I used to turn my nose up at. But that morning it smelled like comfort. Sarah was in the kitchen wearing the same sweater from the night before. Her hair was tied back simply. No jewelry. No makeup. Just warmth. "Good morning," she said gently. "Did you sleep okay?" He nodded. My voice wouldn't come out. She poured me a cup of coffee and placed it in front of me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel had already left for school. He taught history at a public high school nearby. He left early every morning to prepare his lessons. He never complained about his salary. He never asked me for help. I used to think that made him stubborn. Now I knew it made him strong. Sarah sat across from me at the table. She watched me quietly. Not suspicious. Just observant. "Linda," she said softly, "you can stay as long as you need. No pressure. No timeline." My throat tightened. I didn't deserve this kindness. And she sensed it. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "You don't owe us anything," she said. "We do this because it's right." After breakfast she handed me a small list. "Only if you feel up to it," she said. "Fold laundry. Wash dishes. Sweep the floor. Simple task." I nodded eagerly. I needed to do something. Anything. I scrubbed dishes like my life depended on it. My hands, used to signing contracts, now scrubbed old pots. And with every movement, I felt something washing away. Arrogance. Pride. Blindness. When Daniel came home that afternoon, he froze in the doorway. "Mom," he said, "you didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," I replied. We ate dinner together. Rice and vegetables. Simple. Warm. Real. They talked about their day. Daniel spoke about his students. About a boy who finally learned to read after months of struggle. His eyes lit up as he spoke. And I realized something painful. My other children measured success in money and prestige. Daniel measured it in lives changed. That night, they again insisted I take the bed. I refused at first. They didn't argue. They simply smiled. And let me. As I lay there, I heard them talking quietly again. This time I didn't pretend to sleep. I listened. "We really don't have enough," Daniel said. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. "We'll make it work." "How?" Daniel asked. Silence. Then the sound of a drawer opening. "We can sell the rings," she said calmly. "No," Daniel said quickly. "They mean too much." "They are symbols," Sarah replied. "Our love doesn't live in metal." "My mom needs us," she continued. "And I won't let her go hungry." That was it. That was the moment. I sat up in bed and pressed my hand to my mouth to stop myself from sobbing. They were willing to sell their wedding rings. The only valuable things they owned. For me. A woman who had judged them. A woman who had looked down on them. A woman who didn't deserve this. The next morning I woke up early. Before them. I made coffee. Toasted bread. I set the table. Small things. But they mattered. Sarah came into the kitchen and stopped. She looked surprised. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," I replied. She studied me for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp. Not cold. But intelligent. "Linda," she said slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied. She hesitated. Then spoke. "Something doesn't add up." My heart started pounding. "You don't talk like someone who just lost everything," she said. "You're careful with words. You notice details. And you walked to our house instead of calling for help." Froze. Before I could respond, Daniel walked in. "What's going on?" he asked. Sarah smiled gently. "Nothing," she said. "Just talking." But she knew. I could see it in her eyes. I couldn't lie anymore. Not to them. Not after everything. I sat down. My hands trembled. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. Daniel sat across from me. Sarah stayed close. I took a deep breath. "This was a test," I whispered. Silence. Daniel blinked. "A test," he repeated. Tears filled my eyes. "I pretended to lose everything," I said. "I needed to know who loved me without money." Daniel stared at me. Sarah didn't move. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shocked. She just nodded slowly. "I thought so," she said softly. Daniel turned to her. "You knew." "I suspected," she replied. "But it didn't matter." Daniel looked at me again. "Is it true?" he asked. He nodded. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I never meant to hurt you." Daniel stood up suddenly. I braced myself. For anger. For shouting. For rejection. Instead he hugged me. Tightly. "You shouldn't have had to do this," he said. "A mother who tests her children is a mother who has been hurt." That broke me. Sarah joined us. She placed her hand on my shoulder. You needed truth, she said. And now you have it. I told them everything. About the doors that closed. About the words that cut me. About the $50. Daniel clenched his fists. Sarah closed her eyes. That shouldn't have happened, Daniel said. No, I replied. But it did. And now, I continued, my lawyer is coming today. They stiffened. To reveal the truth, I said. And there will be consequences. Daniel shook his head. No, he said immediately. I don't want their punishment. I don't want your money. Sarah nodded. We don't want anything, she said. We did what we did because it was right. That was when I knew. This wasn't about inheritance. This wasn't about revenge. This was about values. About who we choose to be when no one is watching. I looked at the clock. 9 a.m. The truth was coming. And nothing would ever be the same again. The house felt different after the truth came out. Not heavier. Quieter. As if the walls themselves were waiting. Daniel sat on the edge of the sofa. His hands were clasped together so tightly his knuckles were white. Sarah stood near the window, looking out at the street, as if she already knew what was about to arrive. And I sat at the small kitchen table, wearing borrowed clothes, feeling smaller than I ever had in my penthouse. The clock ticked loudly. Too loudly. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked. His voice wasn't angry. I was worried. I don't want this to destroy us, he said. I don't want this to turn into a war. I nodded slowly. I don't want revenge, I said. I want accountability. Sarah turned from the window. There's a difference, she said quietly. And the difference matters. She was right. And that scared me. At exactly 9 o'clock, we heard engines outside. Not one car. Low. Heavy. The kind of sound that doesn't belong on a quiet street like this. I stood up. My heart pounded. This was it. A knock echoed through the house. Firm. Professional. Not asking. Announcing. Daniel opened the door. Robert stood there in a dark suit. For a moment he didn't recognize me. Then his eyes widened. My God, Linda, he whispered. You look like the truth, I replied. He nodded slowly and stepped aside. Behind him, 4 men in suits waited quietly. Security. The contrast was almost absurd. Money standing inside a house that had never known much of it. Robert entered first. He greeted Daniel and Sarah respectfully. Very respectfully. They are the reason this test ended, I said. Robert nodded. I can see that, he replied. He opened his briefcase and placed documents on the table. Neatly. Precisely. The sound of paper felt louder than it should have. Before he could speak, I raised my hand. Wait, I said. 2 more people are coming. Robert glanced at his watch. They'll be here shortly, he said. Daniel stiffened. Jessica and Michael, he asked. He nodded. Sarah inhaled slowly. They don't belong here, Daniel said. They made their choice. Yes, I replied. But choices need witnesses. 10 minutes later, expensive cars appeared at the end of the street. They didn't fit here. They looked out of place. Like visitors who didn't belong. Jessica arrived first. Her white car gleamed. She stepped out wearing sunglasses and a cream-colored coat. Michael arrived moments later. Gray car. Expensive watch. Impatient expression. They walked together toward the house. I watched from the window. Neither of them looked worried. Annoyed maybe. But not worried. That hurt more than I expected. They knocked. Daniel opened the door. Jessica stepped inside without asking. Michael followed. Their eyes scanned the room. The furniture. The walls. People. Then they saw me. Jessica froze. Mom, she said sharply. What are you doing here? Michael frowned. I thought you were staying at a shelter, he said. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch. Let it work. I knocked on your doors 3 days ago, I said calmly. I asked for help. Jessica laughed nervously. That was different, she said. You didn't look like yourself. That's the point, I replied. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Why is Robert here? He asked. Robert stepped forward. I'm here to clarify your mother's situation, he said. And your own. He placed documents on the table. Linda Miller is not bankrupt, he said. She did not lose her business. She did not lose her money. Jessica blinked. Michael's face drained of color. This was a test, Robert continued. A test your mother designed to see who would help her when she had nothing. Jessica's mouth opened, closed, opened again. This is insane, she said. You tricked us. No, I replied. I gave you a choice. Michael slammed his hand on the table. This isn't fair, he said. You put us in an impossible position. No, I said quietly. I put you in a human one. I turned to Daniel and Sarah. They opened their door, I said. They gave me their bed. They were willing to sell their wedding rings. Jessica's head snapped toward Sarah. Is that true? She asked. Sarah met her gaze calmly. Yes, she said. And we would have done it. Daniel stepped forward. His voice shook, but it didn't break. For years you treated me like a failure, he said. You mocked my job. You looked down on my wife. And when Mom needed help, you closed the door. Jessica started crying. Loud. Dramatic. I didn't know it was really her, she sobbed. If I had known. You knew it was a woman asking for help, I interrupted. And that was enough. Michael crossed his arms. This is manipulation, he said. You're punishing us. I'm revealing you, I replied. Robert cleared his throat. Linda initially instructed me to rewrite her will, he said. To leave everything to Daniel and Sarah. Jessica gasped. Michael staggered back. You can't do that, Jessica whispered. I can, I replied. And I almost did. Daniel shook his head violently. No, he said. I don't want that. I don't want money this way. Sarah stepped forward. Disinheritance won't heal anything, she said. It will only deepen the damage. Jessica looked at her desperately. Please, she whispered. I'm sorry. Sarah studied her carefully. You're scared, she said. Not changed. That silence was brutal. I felt it in my bones. This was the peak. The moment everything balanced between justice and mercy. Closed my eyes, took a breath, and made a decision. I will not rewrite the will today, I said. Jessica collapsed into a chair. Michael exhaled sharply. But, I continued, the bank is closed. What? Michael asked. No more money, I said. No allowances. No bailouts. No emergencies solved with checks. If you want to remain my children in practice, not just on paper, you will earn it. Robert nodded. We will establish conditions, he said. Family therapy. Community service. Real apologies. Years of effort. Jessica cried quietly. Michael stared at the floor. Daniel looked at Sarah. She nodded. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said. But not unlimited ones. Robert handed Daniel an envelope. This is not inheritance, I said. It's recognition. Inside was a property deed. Daniel stared. House. For them. Purchased already. Sarah covered her mouth. No, Daniel said. We can't accept this. You already did, I replied. When you opened the door. Jessica screamed. This is unfair. You already took everything from me, I replied. You took your share for years. Silence fell. Heavy. Permanent. When they left, the house felt peaceful again. Daniel sat beside me. Sarah held my hand. You found your truth, Daniel said. And so did we. He nodded. I had. When the front door closed behind Jessica and Michael, the house felt strangely calm. Not empty. Like a storm had finally passed and left the air clean. Daniel sank onto the sofa. Sarah sat beside him and leaned her head against his shoulder. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. I stood near the window, watching the street return to normal. Neighbors slowly went back inside. The black cars drove away. And for the first time in days there was silence. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. Felt tired. Deeply tired. Not in my body. In my soul. Because even though the truth was finally out, nothing felt simple. Jessica and Michael were still my children. And love doesn't disappear just because disappointment grows. Daniel looked up at me. "Mom," he said gently. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but my eyes burned. "I don't know," I admitted. I wanted answers. I got them. But answers don't always bring peace. Sarah squeezed my hand. "They bring direction," she said softly. "And that's enough for now." She was right. She was almost always right. That afternoon, Robert left quietly. The security team followed. The house returned to what it had been before. A modest living room. An old sofa. Kitchen that smelled like coffee. Daniel offered to make dinner. Sarah insisted on helping. I stayed seated, watching them move around together. They worked as a team. No resentment. No hierarchy. Just care. I thought about Jessica's tears. Michael's silence. Their apologies. Were they real? Maybe. Were they enough? Not yet. Change doesn't happen in moments. It happens in patterns. And I had learned the hard way to wait for patterns. That night I didn't take the bed. I insisted. Truly insisted. Daniel protested. Sarah looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "But only because we'll all sleep better." Took the sofa. It wasn't comfortable. But I slept peacefully. For the first time since this test began. The days that followed were quiet. Intentional. Healing doesn't need noise. Jessica called the next morning. Her voice was small. "Mom," she said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want to lose you." I listened. I didn't promise anything. "I need time," I told her. And that was the truth. Michael texted later that day. Short. Unpolished. "I'm starting therapy." I didn't realize who I had become. That surprised me. Not enough to trust. Enough to notice. Weeks passed. Daniel and Sarah returned to their routines. Teaching. Cleaning shifts. Gardening. Life didn't suddenly become luxurious. Became meaningful. I stayed with them longer than I planned. Not because I needed to. 'Cause I wanted to. One afternoon, Sarah and I sat in the small garden. She trimmed flowers. I watched. "I owe you an apology," I said quietly. She stopped. Looked at me. "I judged you," I continued. "I saw what you didn't have. And I missed who you were." She smiled gently. "You weren't the first," she said. "And you won't be the last. What matters is that you see now." Daniel joined us. He sat on the grass. Leaned back on his hands. "I never wanted to compete," he said suddenly. "With my siblings. I just wanted to live honestly." I looked at him. And I finally understood something. He wasn't the weakest of my children. He was the strongest. Months later we began family therapy. All of us. Jessica cried often. Michael struggled to speak. Daniel stayed quiet. Sarah listened. I listened. Some sessions were painful. Others hopeful. Progress didn't move in straight lines. But it moved. Jessica volunteered at a shelter. The same kind of place she once suggested I go to. She came home shaken. "I didn't see them before," she said. "Not really." Michael reduced his hours. Spent time mentoring young doctors. "I forgot why I started," he admitted. "I didn't praise them. I watched. Change needs witnesses." The house that Daniel and Sarah received wasn't a symbol of wealth. It was stability. A garden Sarah filled with flowers. A place where Daniel graded papers at night. Place built on values, not status. They never bragged. They never thanked me excessively. They simply lived. One evening months later we sat together for dinner. All 5 of us. No tension. No performances. Just food. Conversation. Jessica laughed. Michael asked Daniel about his students. Sarah passed bread. And I realized something. This was the real reward. Not money. Not power. Presence. I didn't rewrite the will immediately. I let time speak. Over 3 years, Jessica and Michael stayed consistent. Not perfect. Consistent. And when I finally updated the documents, I did it with clarity. Not anger. Not revenge. Balance. Today I am still wealthy. But wealth no longer defines me. What defines me is knowing who will open the door when nothing else remains. I no longer test people. I observe. I no longer buy love. Built it. If you're listening to this story and wondering what lesson it holds, it's simple. Money can build houses, but it cannot build hearts. Money can open gates, but it cannot open doors that were never meant to be closed. The people who love you when you have nothing are the only ones who truly love you. And sometimes the one you never expected is the one who saves you.